Okay, so we obviously need some overlap edits in this scene to accomplish our goal of seeing Lexi react and not just sitting on Lou talking the whole time. So how do we create overlap edits, L cuts and J cuts? Well, let's show you the technique. This is probably review for most of you. All right, so to do L cuts and J cuts, the first thing you need to do is unlink things. So you can do that here. Personally, I'm just going to hold the Option key, all right? The other tool you need for this is the Rolling Edit tool, shortcut N, okay? The Rolling Edit tool. Let me blow this up a little bigger so we can see more easily. Boom, boom. Okay, so the Rolling Edit tool is this awesome tool that when I hold down Option so that I'm not linked, and I click on an edit point, it selects that edit point, and if I drag to the left, what it's doing is it's trimming the clip on the left while extending the clip on the right and leaving the audio as it is. Voila! There is the L shape, why we call them L cuts, overlap edit, and now I've got talk, 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 react before she starts talking, right? And I could pull it even further. And obviously, you will be listening to her dialogue, and it'll matter what's going on. Here, just for our demonstration purposes, I'm showing you how that works. And of course, you need to hold that Option key, and you can go in the other direction too, right? Which in this scene may happen, probably not that much, because we're trying to get more of Lexi and less of Lou. But that's it, okay? That is the Rolling Edit tool. Think of it as the L-cut tool, but you need to use the Option key or unlink things in order for it to do its magic. Now, you can do this type of thing in multiple different ways. You also, depending on what you're doing, you can use the Rolling Edit tool. Maybe there's a situation, it's probably less likely, but it's possible, where you want to do something like this. Boop. You want to pull Lexi up here and then use the Option key, span this out in both directions, and then watch it so that you can see what your options are before you do the L cut, right? So you can see how long can I stay there. And then you could trim it back, right? So basically this is like, this is a slower way of doing it, but if it allows you to see something here, and then, hey, maybe you decide, you know what, I'm just a little bit off. Let me use that slip tool, Option, not Option, because I want the audio to stay in sync, and I'm just going to slip it a little bit. Okay, let me put this back so it looks typical. There we go. But whatever it takes, whether it's the Rolling Edit tool or bringing it up on a second layer, what you're really doing in this rough cut is refining the cut with those overlap edits. As soon as the audience understands what Lou is saying and is yearning to see how, if Lexi understands as well, they'll want to see her. That's the key, and that's the natural way conversations happen. Like when you're talking to somebody, they're delivering, most of the information of a sentence is in the beginning of the sentence, right? The end of the sentence is not critical to comprehending it. It's maybe providing some detail. And so this is how an audience watches a scene and how reaction is king can guide you, okay? Okay, let's talk a little bit about cutting patterns. So traditional cutting patterns in scenes are basically to start wide, work into the closer shots, and then work your way out from the closer shots to the longer shots and end it with a longer shot. And back in the old days, in the 50s, studios wouldn't allow us a scene into a movie unless it started with an establishing shot, moved into a two shot, and then a medium shot, close up, and then went from a close up to a two shot, and moved its way out. You couldn't start a scene up close and then jump to a wide shot. They wouldn't allow it. Now, I'm not suggesting we have those strict rules, but it is helpful to keep that in mind. And there is logic to it. The way our thoughts are put together, the way our language is put together, generally starts out more broad and works its way in. Also, based on your scene analysis, most scenes, including this one, start off less emotional and then work up to that big key moment of change that is oftentimes very emotional, and then resolve themselves with less emotion. Okay? And the Hitchcock rule helps us be guided here as well. Basically, to sort of summarize this, the tighter a shot gets, the more intense whatever's going on in the shot becomes. So if we want the temperature, the emotional temperature, to rise, one of our tricks is to cut to closer shots. So I bring this up because what you may notice when you're looking at your rough cut is, in the process of trying to get Boss Lou to deliver the best lines or whatever, you may have somewhat arbitrarily cut in and out. So maybe we're going from like the OTS into the close-up, back to the OTS, to Lexi, to the wide shot, something like that. And we need to be careful of that. What we sometimes call that effect is the yo-yo effect. If you've got a scene where like we start in a wide shot, suddenly we're in a close-up, then we're back to the wide shot, then we're into an OTS, then we're back to the wide shot. This yo-yo effect isn't good for the audience, okay? It's turning up the temperature and then turning it down. It's heating us up and cooling us off. And unless you're intentionally doing this for a creative reason to sort of agitate the audience, usually this isn't an effective method, and it's usually the result of you're trying to create a performance out of the best lines. So be aware of that and try to avoid that scenario. Are there going to be compromises? Yes. There are going to be times where, look, the actor only delivered this critical line in the wide shot. I'd love to stay in the OTS here, but I can't, because it's the only option I have is to go back out. When you have to do it, you have to do it. But if that's not the case, I really want you to be conscious of, why am I working my way in here? Why am I jumping out suddenly? And have a plan as to what's going on there. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about is room tone. Now, there isn't a ton of great room tone in the reels. It was not included. Whenever they recorded room tone, if they did, it's not included in these reels. So you're going to have to hunt around for some room tone. One way that's helpful to hunt around for room tone is up here in the source monitor, like load up a reel or load up a subclip. You can right-click in the source monitor and you can change what's displayed. So if I change this to audio waveform, I now see the audio of the clip, and I can potentially, if I'm looking at an entire reel, I can go through and identify places. Here's a quiet spot. Maybe I can steal, right here. Maybe I can steal some room tone from right here. Okay? Then you can go in, listen, see if it's going to work. But that's a handy thing that I sometimes use, switching that display mode to waveform. Now, what are you going to do with room tone? Well, room tone can allow you to slow things down. For example, let's see if we can find a scenario here.
What do you mean, Lou? What?
Okay, how about right here?
What do you mean, Lou?
She says, "What do you mean, Lou?" I'm curious. I want to put a beat there. I want to put like a real long pause. I wonder if I stretch her out here, how long she holds sort of a look. Let's see. Yeah, she does. Let's keep it going. It's kind of a weird look, but for our purposes, this will be fine. And I'm going to see what the audio does here, but I bet, yeah, somebody's going to start talking. See that waveform? So I can't use, this isn't silence. So I'm going to have to take that back out. That's what some room tone could potentially help. And here's just a touch of room tone I grabbed earlier. Probably not enough. Well, we'll see. Boop. We'll stick it in there. And then I'm just going to actually stick it in there again. Maybe apply a little fade. Make it really short. See if that hides it. I'm going to ripple delete this so Boss Lou goes back here. And the goal here was just, hey, could I create a pregnant pause where it's silence in the room, it's uncomfortable, and Lexi just sits there with no one speaking?
What do you mean, Lou?
Yeah, it works. Now, I think I would need another little fade here because you totally can hear the audio edit going from her clip to the room tone. Let's see if that fixed it.
What do you mean, Lou?
For our rough cut, we can live with that, and for these purposes. Now, down the road, I'm going to have to mix that better, maybe do some noise reduction to figure that out. But I just want to show you that room tone can allow you with to create some pauses. If you feel like the scene's going too quickly, you want a funny little awkward moment where they both stare at each other, get some room tone, find a nice Lexi reaction or Lou sitting looking sweaty and weird or something, and you can create those yourself. The editor, if you've got the footage, the room tone and the reactions, you can slow things down, speed things up as you like. Okay, so as you're going through your rough cut, you're working on all the things we just talked about. You're trying to make it feel more natural, smooth. You're trying to let reaction is king guide you, while at the same time the scene is making sense, and you're hiding, the weaknesses in the performance, like that Lou is looking down at the script all the time. Additionally, you're trying to be conscious not to do the yo-yo effect thing. One practice that I think Murch is discussing in his book as well, that can be really handy, is watch your dialogue scenes with the sound off, right? It will help you connect to their reactions. Because remember, in movies, reaction is king, not the words. It's not what they're saying that's so critical. It's how they're reacting to that. So I often, on a dialogue scene, will just go through my cut and judge, why am I on that? Like, why don't I cut to a reaction shot there? Like, I don't believe Lou in that. Do I have a better? Maybe I need to go back and I have a better performance I can pull in there. Maybe I can cover it with Lexi in reaction. But it's a really handy thing to do, is to watch a scene with the sound off. Another thing to keep in mind at this point in the edit is, are there things that I can just lose, including lines, okay? Are there things that are redundant or that just aren't funny or don't make sense or are just dragging it out? Maybe there's a line or two you can totally cut out. That's great. That's fine. If you can make this scene work better with fewer lines or fewer reactions or fewer beats, get rid of them. Another thing that we haven't talked about is, there's ways other than L cuts and J cuts to put in more reaction shots of Lexi. So for example, here I've got a little bit of Lexi just reacting, just looking. And you could, of course, you would take more care as to where you're placing this, but you could drop it right in the middle.
But that's too easy. Let me try something else.
To cover up some weakness of Lou, to show us more of our protagonist. So don't think you're limited to just these edit points to play around with reaction. You can always steal a shot and drop it in here. And oftentimes I find this great reaction stuff just after cut is yelled. So look for those things on the heads and tails of shots. Okay, another really important thing to talk about here, and I think I have an example. Maybe I have an example here.
Let me try something else.
Yeah, let me find an example here. So I did match frame there.
What is it that we're not in?
What do you mean?
Okay, so right here, let's say you decided for whatever reason to use this shot in your sequence, but to stay on Lexi when she delivers this line because you really like the way Lou was looking or something.
What is it that we're not in?
What do you mean?
So I'm going to just cut this in
What
down here just as an example, and we'll ignore all that other stuff. So let's pretend we've
we're
got
not
this.
in?
What do you
So what business are we not in?
What is it that we're not in?
What is it that we're not in? Now, I want to, for whatever reason, stay here and hear Lexi deliver this line. The problem is there's only one mic, and the boom mic is pointing at Lou, so her audio sounds crummy. You cannot use this audio for Lexi delivering this line. So what you need to do is go find, I think she says it here.
What do you mean, Lou?
So I'm going to match frame again. Whoop. So there she says it. So you need to go find her delivering that line when the microphone was on her. So this is an off mic line. This is an on mic line. So I'm going to grab that. Let's see, there's this thing. I'm going to grab that. And for right now, I'm going to stick it underneath here. And so what I need to do is take out her off mic line
that we're not in.
So before she speaks, I need to trim that out. And now I need her to say it here. So let's listen.
What do you mean, Lou?
There it was. What do you mean, Lou? Whoop. So I'm going to trim that down. And I need to stick that in here and do my best to match it up with her jaw moving.
What do you mean, Lou?
And guess what? It's easy to do that. You can easily stick almost anything in here. And this, you can cheat lines in here. So in this case, she actually is saying roughly this line and I'm sticking it in here, but I could be sticking anything in here. I could be stealing a line from somewhere else in the scene and putting it in here and using this shot. So now I've got her saying it.
What do you mean, Lou?
Now, if I'm lucky, I can just drag this. There will be some room tone and it'll work.
That we're not in.
What do you mean, Lou?
Yeah, for now, that's going to work. So I'm going to do a little fade.
That we're not in.
What do you mean, Lou?
Okay, so we've got our same shot. Lou on mic line, Lexi on mic line. So that is required. You cannot keep those off mic lines. And as you've noticed in some cases, those off mic lines aren't delivered by the right actress, right? In Lexi's, here, this shot of Lexi.
What is it that we are not paid to do?
Who is that guy talking? That's not Lou. Well, it's the assistant director reading Lou's lines because Lou wasn't there. So if you want to keep a reaction shot here but stick in Boss Lou's lines, you're going to have to cheat his lines underneath there too. The important thing I want you to start to realize as editor is if you've got the footage, the scene is entirely elastic. You can reshape it, slow it down, speed it up, put words into people's mouths, shape performances. You have the control as the editor. You just need to exercise it to make the best scene possible, okay? Oh, and for the record, this sort of cheating a line here also works in the other way. And I've done it. It's harder. You have to be careful. It's more tricky, but you can sometimes, I didn't like the delivery, or maybe there was a bad mic for actually a line when they're on camera. You like the way Lou looks here, but you like the way he sounds in another take. You can do this exact same technique and cheat a line onto the face of an actor, and you can get away with it. You'd be surprised how much you can get away with. Okay, another important thing, and we've mentioned this already, but at this point, maybe you're almost to fine cut. Don't forget that scene analysis. Go back, reread that scene analysis, and then look at your cut. Are you achieving the goals that you set out but when you were reading the script? What's changed? Maybe it will remind you that, like, oh yeah, Lexi is the protagonist. Why is my whole scene just like Lou? I need to see Lexi, and I need that change moment to be really emotional. Remember, as Murch talks about, you are the surrogate for the audience. You're the ombudsman for the audience. So when you're reviewing the cut, you need to do your best to step out of your prejudices, step out of everything you know, and watch and feel the scene like somebody for the first time, frame by frame by frame as you go. What information are you getting? Where are your eyes? Do you understand what they just said? Why are we cutting here? This is what makes good editing. Critical eye and this ability, no matter how many times you've watched the cut and you're sort of burned out with it, to sort of take a deep breath, sit back and watch it from the perspective of the audience, not from the perspective of an editor who's burned out and just wants to be finished. Autopilot is the enemy of good editing. Also, when you're reviewing your cut, a good thing to keep in mind is where you're feeling the problem as you watch it may not actually be the source of the problem. So maybe you're watching it along and you're like, this shot, this shot of Lou, I just don't buy. I think something's wrong here. His reaction is wrong, or something feels incorrect. Now, maybe, in fact, that shot is wrong. You just need to go get another take. But what often is the case with editing, it's often something earlier. Something earlier isn't doing what it's supposed to do to set up this moment. And as a result, it doesn't matter what you do to this moment, your problem is actually over here, and you need to address this first. Because editing, right, filmmaking is through time, and everything is compiling. It's this accumulation. So every shot is building. And if you have things incorrect here, if you're not really doing the setup, if we're coming in and we're not really setting up what's going on correctly, then the payoff maybe isn't working. So keep that in mind when you're trying to problem solve a scene and you're just unhappy. Where you're unhappy may not be the first place you need to look. Go back to the beginning. Are you setting it up? Are things clear? Is reaction king? You following your scene analysis? It's not always obvious upon first viewing where the problem really lies. Okay, so I think that is plenty to get you going toward these fine cuts. As I keep talking about, good editing is sort of this optimistic attitude, this tireless attitude that I can improve this. I can solve this problem. I am willing to go back into my reels if necessary and find what I need. I am willing to cheat lines, overlap edit. I am willing to dig up some room tone to make this work the way it's supposed to work. And having that attitude, putting the time in, will pay off with good editing, and collaborators will appreciate that and will want to work with you again. Okay, that's it for this week. Good luck on your fine cuts. All right, happy editing.